eTry-on, which is let's say, the project behind this webinar. Now I will give you a little bit information about what is, let's say, the purpose of this workshop, and I will walk you through the time schedule, and then I'll introduce you to Jim, who will give you a much better, let's say, presentation of the field, of the landscape of where we are. So our motivation for doing, let's say, this project, for starting this workshop as a derivative of the project, was that although the artificial intelligence, computer vision, and many of the interactive technologies of the XR technologies have been gaining momentum and have been offering significant benefits into a number of industries, this was not the case for the fashion industry. What was lagging a bit behind in adapting all these nice technologies and for bringing them to the benefit of the users. So our motivation was to try to facilitate some of the main, let's say, lines of work into this industry, like the garment design or the consumer interaction. And this is where we have initially conceptualized the concept of eTry-on, so allowing people to virtually wear on their clothes, but also allow the designers to virtually design the garments and try to fit them in their models and decide on the best model, let's say, that they can use. And into this, let's say, adventure, we have realized the many difficulties that we have to face in order to be able to address this like very ambitious objective. And the goal of this workshop is exactly this: to, let's say, walk you through all the difficulties and the challenges that someone will have to address in order to be able to offer this kind of futuristic functionality to the fashion industry in general, and to what we call human function interaction. Now, with respect to the timetable of the workshop, we will start by Jim Doing, that will do a presentation on the eTry-on project and an introduction to the XR in fashion in general. Then we will follow with two more, let's say, detailed and technical presentations. The first had to do with the VR application for the virtual fitting of fashion garments of avatars, and the one that has to do with a Snapchat filter for artificial intelligence for virtual try-ons. And we will later on go through all the challenges in garment representation, from 3D design to Lens Studio by David Gullivan. And in the end of our workshop, we will have the keynote by Ryan Smith. I will introduce you, let's say, the speakers when there is time to present. Just now it's the Jim Doing that will be presenting. So Jim is the Chief Executive Officer of Inmetile. Inmetile is a company with a mission to accelerate positive change on sustainability in the apparel industry. And after an early career as a software engineer in startups and working in the university sector, Jim joined Inmetile as an early employee and became the Chief Technical Officer. But after 9 years focusing on function virtual try-on using machine learning and image technology, Inmetile was acquired in 2019, at which point they pivoted to focus entirely on 3D technologies. And that was the point where Jim took up the place of Jim, a Chief Executive Officer. So Jim, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Spiros. Let me just get my screen sharing correctly. Can you see my presentation now, or is it still on my
It seems okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Great, thanks very much. So this afternoon, I'm going to give you a presentation that's somewhat in two parts. The first part I'll use to let you know who I am and what Metale does, to give you an idea about why we're particularly interested in XR in fashion. why we got involved in the eTry-on project, and why we're working on it. I want to really give you an idea of how we see XR in fashion and the opportunities for XR in fashion, the broader landscape, but also try and talk about why we should be trying to do this at all. As Spiros said, we're a mission-led company who's trying to improve positive change in the apparel industry through technology. From that point, we really want to explain why XR, we think XR has got some benefits for apparel. And then the second half of the project really is explaining in more depth about the eTry-on project, which is a fantastic consortium project that's funded by the EC. Give you a bit of an idea about the work we've done so far, but mainly about the work we're going to be finishing off by next March, and then piloting with users through 2022. So first off, Metile, which is the company I work for. Metile was founded actually as early as 2008. I joined as one of the early employees in 2010. Most of our time we've been focusing on virtual try-on. And the main product we created was the thing that you see in the center of the screen here, which we called the Metile Experience, which allowed users to enter a few measurements of their body, create a realistic avatar, and try clothes on when they were buying them. And we digitized those clothes from samples. So we had a specialized image capture rig that went into the warehouse of the retailer or into their photo studio. The technology was also used in a couple of different settings as well. So for example, the technology was kind of the main feature in a slot in a UK TV magazine program called This Morning, which is very widely watched. And that was fantastically exciting and great to see. We started moving away from a consumer virtual try-on into composite imagery, so creating model imagery out of a mixture of different image sources. So both our digitized garments and kind of traditional models, human models that we'd photographed. One of the kind of most exciting applications of that was that we created composite, or kind of essentially augmented imagery for Manchester City. It was at a point when they knew they were going to be league champions, but they didn't want any of their players to wear the merchandise, the champion merchandise, because they thought they'd jinx themselves. They thought it'd be bad luck. The main product that Metile makes now is along that theme. It's a composite image technology, so essentially offline augmented reality. We digitize models, and this time we're taking a 3D scan of them, and we're rigging an avatar that matches their scan. We then pose that into every single photo we take of them, so that we can take that avatar into 3D CAD software for apparel, and leverage the high quality physics simulation for garments in that to create a composite image, which is both doesn't require a physical sample for photography, but is natural and realistic and compelling. So these are the kind of images that we're creating with our technology. And that's what is kind of our current product at market. Since last year, though, we've been moving much more heavily into the area of augmented reality, mainly, but also bits of virtual reality. Firstly, through the eTry-on project, which is you're going to be hearing an awful lot more about this afternoon. We've been creating social AR lenses this year in apparel, and really trying to stretch what's possible with those and how accurate they can be made. So I've got a selection here. The one on the top left is a Spark AR plugin that's a lens, which is for Instagram, just for trying on masks. The other are various types of garment try-on, from the super accurate, or as accurate as we can make it at the moment with the technology, to the completely fantastical with the dress on the bottom right. We're also really happy to announce last week that we were selected as on Snap's Ghost Innovation Lab program as their first shopping and fashion fellows. So we're working closely with Snap to to work out what can be improved about their platform and what we can really we can use that's already available in the best ways to create really compelling garment AR experiences. So the way I want to kind of talk to you about XR in fashion is that there are a lot of different things that XR in fashion is and that it could be. I've mapped it out for the sake of this discussion along two axes. On the x-axis, I'm thinking about the supply chain, which goes from the idea for a design for a garment and kind of culminates in that garment being sold and then worn by a consumer at the other end. So that goes through brands or agencies designing the clothes through to people wholesaling those designs, them getting manufactured, them getting marketed, and then sold. Now that whole process has got its kind of real roots in a physical process of the material process for that, which is cloth through manufacture through to shops, essentially. Although there are some electronic substitutes for parts of that value chain. At the other end of the scale is essentially purely digital experiences, purely digital workflows. And XR, I think, is for both of these things. Metail traditionally, and in our intention for the future, we really want to deal in the world of clothes that are going to be made and going to be sold and worn. But we do recognize that there's this completely digital production and consumption value chain, and XR is absolutely essential in that too. So let me map this out. Some of these things are here, some of them are happening and really quite widespread. Some of them have kind of established their use case, but they really are not widespread. Some of them really are nascent, and some of them I haven't really seen many or any examples of at all. They're just kind of things that are talked about and could happen. So let's start with the most established. Probably the most established is having clothes in games, usually used as a kind of brand activation. So they're not garments that would exist in the world. Things that probably you might not know about that are actually really quite established, although not necessarily so widespread, is that people use virtual sampling. So they use 3D CAD and they use XR, or at least stills and animations of 3D CAD garments rather than a physical sample while they're iteratively developing a product's design. Another thing that does happen more than people realize is those kind of composite synthetic images where either AI or even just Photoshop layering are used to put a garment together with an image of a model who wasn't originally wearing it, which is more flexible and lowers the image creation costs, usually for e-commerce. But that AR try-on is also really the bedrock of some virtual fashion applications like DressX. So when you purchase a virtual garment in DressX, the asset that you actually end up being able to receive is an image of that virtual garment composed onto a photo of you that you can then share on social media or do whatever you want with. And then there are a whole host of kind of more nascent applications. So I'll go from the left. So virtual showrooming and B2B sales is when a brand perhaps doesn't retail goods themselves, they'll need to sell B2B to get retailers to take on those designs, and kind of using virtual environments for that kind of showrooming to show their goods is kind of nascent, but has happened a bit. Also using augmented and virtual reality in like online wholesaling channels has started to happen, but it isn't mainstream yet. Kind of further down the chain towards retail, we'll be hearing from Ryan at Shopify later, and in fashion, using AR or VR for looking at products, so kind of seeing a garment floating in space, either in your room or in a virtual environment. There are examples of it again, but it's really not widespread. We've seen a number of different magic mirror applications in store. So having a large screen that shows you, but with the garment on. But they've almost always been innovation and marketing projects. It's not something which has ever really gained a business case for in-store. Virtual try-on that Mitel was involved in has been nascent probably for about 8 years now, but hasn't really gained a vast amount of traction in the industry. We're starting to see virtual models as well. So, for example, Shudu is an entirely virtual model. She's appeared in videos and runways. She's appeared in advertising and in stills. And this is something where, especially with the advent of MetaHuman, we might expect to see an awful lot more virtual modeling happening, or digital modeling happening, but it's really not kind of gained an awful lot of traction in fashion just yet. The last one that I've identified as nascent is virtual fashion, which is buying virtual designs that are only ever intended to be virtual, or perhaps they have some physical equivalents, but the virtual is the main asset that's being sold. So this is companies like DressX, which I mentioned, and DigitalAX, and the Fabricant as well are a virtual fashion house. The last two, which I think I haven't seen live examples of yet, is real-time augmented reality try-on. I think beyond social media garment try-on lenses, there hasn't really been an AR try-on experience that's been developed and targeted at retail and marketing. And the other one, back in the product development side of the value chain, is the idea about bringing people probably remote together inside a virtual environment to do collaborative design. So this is something where, if you watch a lot of the promotions by NVIDIA, is happening kind of in manufacturing. They'll create virtual problem-solving environments for working out a process for when they're manufacturing cars, for example. And that virtual environment is really useful for figuring out things about the process and refining it. The same thing could be possible with a garment design. Quite often, our clients have got people doing technical design in one area of the world, and people who are kind of closer to the US market, so in US or in the European markets, they'd be in Europe, who are kind of guiding that design. They're not the technical side, they're more on the commercial side, and being able to bring them together to collaborate more closely in a virtual environment sounds like it could be a really productive thing to happen, but I haven't seen examples of it yet. And as we go about thinking about solutions to all of these and technologies to form the basis for all of these potential applications, there are a load of different pressures, different preferences and forces that are at play. So the closer you are to something which is rooted in a physical process or relates to a physical product or design, the more important accuracy is, as in how close its fidelity is to the clothes that eventually get made. And when you're in a purely digital flow, the emphasis is all on realism. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's like an exact piece of clothing, but it does matter that it's realistic and it's natural. And this subtle difference between accuracy and realism can often have some pretty fundamental issues when you're addressing technology, especially because a lot of the gaming industry derived technologies have entirely focused on realism, and trying to adapt them into a workflow where accuracy is key can be really quite challenging. So the second one is the closer you are into the B2B side of things, the more people will consider using a new tool or platform for this kind of technology. I think people will try out, in the consumer world, people will try out new tools or technologies, but you can't really expect an awful lot of traction with them. So it's the closer you are to one of those consumer facing use cases, the more it's important to focus on the platforms that are already there, focus on the social networks that are already there and where people are already spending their attention, rather than trying to take their attention into a new platform or a new tool. However, balancing that out is the fact that, especially in apparel, for one reason and another, there is an awful lot of inertia from their legacy ways of work, methods of work, and legacy tools, which doesn't happen so much when you're talking about consumer platforms, especially if you're targeting younger generations. Then they're willing to try something new. But on the flip side, they'll try something new, but they need it to be cool. They need a lot of immersion, they need a lot of interactivity, and without those things, applications won't succeed. Back up at the other end, kind of in the supply chain, then really fitting in with the way things work at the moment is pretty essential. And if you're trying to step out of that significantly, then you're going to face an awful lot of inertia. So kind of coming on to kind of why bother with any of this, which is an important question to ask always and to answer before you get into things. I've identified kind of like 3 main areas which I think XR has some really great benefits in. The first is that it helps dematerialize product development. So I mentioned about iterative development before. So product development in apparel will typically go that a product's sketched, a technical design's built up with a cutting pattern. At some point then, the brand will decide that they want to see whether how their design is really going to look when it's made. And they'll talk to either their manufacturing side of their business or with a manufacturing partner. They'll get a sample made that will usually get air freighted back to the design, to the brand. They'll look at it, they'll make some revisions, and they'll do it again. And generally, there can be as many as 5 of those iterations where there's a single sample made, there's an air freight back. And considering how inefficient single samples are generally in manufacturing, if the manufacturing line hasn't been set up for unit of 1 manufacturing, then this creates an awful lot of waste, an awful lot of carbon footprint. So being able to kind of move away from that is a really, really big deal. Because it means we've got less carbon footprint, less waste. There's another problem. Well, so there are 2 other big problems that we think that dematerialization could help with, and these are around fashion's big root problems. So the first one is something you'll have heard of as fast fashion, which we try in Meetail, we try not to use because fast fashion has a positive aspect and a negative aspect for as far as we're concerned. The negative aspect of fast fashion is that it's kind of consume, dispose, cycle driven behavior. And that consumer behavior is definitely difficult to deal with. And it's definitely a problem for sustainability. The other problem that fashion has is around risk and inventory. So in some companies, the garment design will start 18 months before a garment ends up at market. And unless it's something which sells every year, then they cannot possibly know what the market demand is going to be for that product by the time they get to market. So there is a big drive to try and get faster, to be able to start product development later, so that you just inherently have less risk in what you're creating. You're more certain about the market demand by the time you get the product to market. Otherwise, you end up with too much risk that you'll make too many. And from a brand's point of view, too few is also as bad as too many. From a sustainability problem point of view, then too many is definitely worse. That people won't want to buy or have to buy cheap. Which creates margin problems for the industry and creates a lot of workforce problems as well. So we call that the inventory problem. It's often referred to as the inventory problem. The second one is that XR has a promise of giving richer engagement with consumers and bringing them together with designs and brands. This is important to retailers and brands, especially at the moment, because there is cost of acquiring a consumer through marketing is extremely high at the moment, mainly because advertising is an oligopoly between Facebook and Google for getting hold of people's eyeballs. which drives costs up. So they're always looking for cost savings. And in a few places, XR has proved to be extremely effective and give you much better customer acquisition. The adverts are extremely compelling for people. Part of saving the money is they need to go where their audience is. And one of their bigger problems is trying to engage with younger audiences. So they're building their market for the future. So that means trying to engage with millennials, engage with Gen Z. And that means really focusing on social networks at the moment, focusing on things like gaming as well, and on Twitch. From a consumer's point of view as well, the more you're able to understand garment designs, the more you're able to understand what garments apparel is really going to be like when you own it, the more likely it is that you'll make good purchases, that you'll buy things that you'll love and wear. And that has the potential to be a really big sustainability win as well. The last one I've already kind of alluded to about virtual fashion, which is that real advocates and believers in virtual fashion. Hello, what was that? I got a question, Spiros. Okay, never mind.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So real advocates of virtual fashion talk about it as a new modality for fashion. They see a world in which you, if you want to buy fashion for identity and for self-expression and for all of the creative things that fashion is, you do that digitally. You do that without a footprint on the environment. And even if that happens somewhat partially, virtual fashion does have this potential to be a sustainable alternative to fast fashion. So instead of a consume, dispose in physical goods, you have a consume, dispose in virtual goods, in digital goods, which has far less of a footprint. Although, given that at the moment, virtual fashion is currently fairly well tied to NFTs, the difference in footprint isn't as great as it will be when NFTs sort out their environmental story. Okay, so I'll move on now to the e-try-on project. I mentioned that it was funded by the European Commission under their Horizon 2020 program. The aim is to modernize the way people create, consume, and experience fashion items by offering novel human fashion interaction applications, which is the neologism we created. We're doing that in 3 different areas. So they kind of correspond to areas on my XR map as well. Creative, which is in the supply chain as people are creating fashion designs. Social, so primarily in marketing and engagement, and in shopping in the retail domain where people are actually transacting and buying goods. And the overall concept of how it fits together is something like this here. So what we have is 3D mobile scanning of people's bodies for avatars. We have a basis of digital garments that we in the project, we're really basing around brands who've already moved to 3D CAD to create their garment designs. And towards that inventory problem that I was talking about, can we do better at detecting emerging trends and connecting these this knowledge about the market and the impact of designs on fashion back in to the design of garments into product development? And can we use those same algorithms to help bring consumers together with garments that they're going to find really appealing and love and wear? So to bridge that gap, we have another technological basis, which is bringing the bodies together with the garments, doing cloth sim, replacements for cloth sim, avatar movement and draping. And then 3 main application areas, which were mentioned in the previous slide, which is an application for fashion designers, an application in social media, and an application in AR try-on for online shopping. It is a consortium project. There are 5 partners from around Europe. It's led by Seth, and Spiros was speaking earlier. Seth are taking the overall lead in the project. They're building the XR apps. They're also doing some of the R&D into consumer preference prediction, and they're running the pilots. Mita, we're kind of bringing the 3D bodies together with the 3D butt garments, looking at that cloth sim optimization, looking at whether we can improve the sim and the rendering. And there's some of the underlying XR technologies. The avatars we are bringing in from Quanticore, who are a Belgian company who specialize in 3D body measurements and reconstruction from mobile images. Providing the garment data, we have a company called Odlo, they make sportswear, especially Nordic sports and running and cycling, which they're very strong in. They were pretty early adopters of 3D CAD, and they've got a long way with their 3D CAD rollout. So they're expert in developing garments like this and using the tools. They're also running the user pilots with their content and for the product development use case with their staff. The final piece of the puzzle is a company called Malzy Insights, who are based in Scotland, and they specialize in understanding and predicting consumer preference through a marketplace type application. So users can see a number of different garments, and they can give feedback on it, and they've got a particularly compelling interface that users like to do to kind of give their feedback on garments, and they use that feedback data to create preference predictions. We are almost halfway through the project now. In fact, exactly halfway through the project. We've got a lot of the fundamental technology development done, a lot of the R&D done. This timeline isn't complete. It focuses mostly on the technical milestones that I guess this audience would be mostly interested in. If you want to see any of our reports as we go along, you're more than welcome to go onto the website where we'll be publishing them. And we have a Twitter account as well, and LinkedIn. And we'll be wrapping up this time next year and publishing our findings at that point and giving our report on what we've been up to. So I'll just go very briefly through these three applications so you can see specifically what we're aiming to develop. It'll also provide a little bit of context for the technical papers that follow about why we've been facing the challenges that we've been facing. So in the designer app, kind of state of the art is that 3D garments, virtual garments, will be fitted on grayscale avatars that are all static, and you can create kind of a view and images, renders of these avatars of the garments. But it sometimes lacks the feeling and creativity that goes along with fashion design. And we've also found that some people in product development in fashion, they get very distracted by the 3D grayscale avatar, and they think that the entire thing looks too computery and not sufficiently natural and creative. And being able to create better avatars, a bit more movement, could help people accept 3D more and could help them understand the garments better. So what we're developing is a VR showroom application, and this would be used when the designers of garments are presenting their latest iterations to the product managers who can understand the market and understand consumer preference intuitively, to give design feedback or for final approval. So the idea is that you would pick a fit model that you wanted to try the garments on. You would design outfits, select garments from the rack to put on the mannequin, and you'd then be able to see how that outfit looked on an animated avatar, so on a catwalk. And I think you'll see an example of that from Orestes later of our latest iterations. Challenges here are the avatar photorealism and quality, which is a difficult one to solve for. Animation of the fit model avatars, which isn't always easy to create. Nicely animated fit models, especially when you've created them from a scan of somebody. We've always got this trade-off as well. I mentioned that the kind of more tied to the physical, the bar for accuracy is extremely high. Generating really good animations of the garments and retaining that accuracy means that we've got some trade-offs with interactivity which have been hard to resolve. Probably one of the, it's not a technical challenge, but one of the hardest things is that the existing workflow is extremely convenient and has evolved to be simple and fast for people. So they'll start off using sketches, they'll then move to Adobe Illustrator, but they're also kind of well versed in using that tool, and then eventually they'll use samples, which overall are hard to create because it involves an awful lot of activity and an awful lot of material, but from the product developer's point of view are fairly simple, because that, as far as they're concerned, them requesting that work to happen is pretty simple. And then, as we've said, predicting the market response. At the moment, this is primarily around a product manager having a feel, having a look at some data, having previous sales numbers, but tying it through to up-to-date market information is really quite hard, and those analytics kind of loops have not been closed yet. The next application is in social, and what we have at the moment is generally influencers will be sent physical samples of garments or from stock physical garments. They'll often photograph themselves in there and take a selfie or quick shoot, share that, and then quite possibly not even wear that garment again. And the sustainability kind of impact of that is poor, and it can certainly be made better. There's also kind of more of a trend in marketing towards kind of micro influencers. So instead of having just one influencer where you send one sample, you would have, you know, 1,000 maybe influencers who each have an audience of a few hundred, rather than one with an audience of hundreds of thousands. And that kind of increases the pressure on physical samples and increases the physical footprint of the activity. So what we're imagining is that a user would take a photo of themselves, perhaps not exactly like this, perhaps just fit in something which is relatively tight and won't show underneath the virtual clothes. We then take the 3D design from Odlo, and we're composing those two together. And if that looks familiar, then it should from earlier in the presentation, because it is pretty much what our Metel's EcoShop product does, with a couple of really important technical challenge differences. Mainly that we've got to do everything we do for eTry-on, except we've got to do it automatically. For eTry-on, we have some parts which have kind of manual fine tuning, and we need to work out how we can live without those manual stages. We also use a little bit of manual fine tuning in the composition and an image prep process, and we've got to replace that basically with machine learning and with image processing as well. And finally, on to the Magic Mirror app, which I think is probably going to be visually one of the more compelling pieces, which is, this has been something that everybody has thought would be a good idea for a very long time, which is, I want to be able to see the clothes on me. I want to be able to understand how the clothes are going to look on me. And AR gives you a promise of doing exactly that, showing you exactly how the clothes are going to look on you. The challenge that we have for an augmented try-on is really trying to get different aspects of it accurate and communicating what accuracy means to different people. On the way there, we have developed some AR try-on in Snapchat. So yes, it's more in a social context, but when we saw that Lens Studio had released full body tracking last year, earlier this year, we realized that we really had to evaluate how good their platform was to see whether it was a viable route forward and what they could do. And it's really great for engagement so far. We've still seen some technical challenges, which, as I mentioned, Metel is now working on with Snap. So the avatars are not as accurate as they might be. The body shapes are generally pretty accurate. If you're a normal kind of body shape, the further you go away from kind of a normal canonical body shape, then the worse their body shape prediction is. And that impacts very quickly on how the garments look on people. When we created our Snapchat lens, all of the garments were skinned so that they didn't really drape properly. The creases, you start with one set of creases and those creases stay with you. So they don't respond to your pose. They don't respond to your different body shapes. And it was also quite difficult getting that initial garment looking good, just because of the way their body model set up and the skeleton. Then trying to get the garment looking natural and looking like it was actually on the user's body shape was also a technical challenge. And both David and Konstantinos will talk more about this kind of area later. The Magic Mirror app itself, compared to the Snapchat lens, will be a Unity-based mobile app. So we'll be building out a fully fledged application with product discovery, which is driven by recommendations. We'll be using a more accurate avatar shape from Quantacores, which will have the advantage of calculating offline. So we've got a kind of a body capture process in the UX rather than trying to just do it in real time in the lens. We'll also have pose detection through MLKit on iOS. Perhaps that would be better than Snaps, we don't know. We're also using a different cloth sim library, which is based on NCloth, which is called ObiCloth, which is still skinned, but it has a bit more dynamism to it that can simulate cloth draping. We're going to also add in an ML component, which uses that 3D data that we've got about the garments to predict how the garments will fit on the user's accurate body shape and give them a visualization of that using a heat map in real time, kind of responding to how they move. So we've got a load of technical challenges with this model. One of the ones that we've hit so far are that trying to get something that visualizes and sims in real time. We've got a tension between the resolution of the model and performance, and that especially is starting to hit kind of how fine creases we can simulate in the garment, because we don't really have enough polygons to do it, enough triangles. We want to optimize the garment sim for accuracy so that the garments that we're showing in the augmented try-on are genuinely looking like the real garment. And we've got to develop this machine learning system to predict fit as a function of shape and pose. So I'll just finish off before I flip over to the Q&A to see if there's been anything there, by kind of giving an overview of the opportunities and challenges for XR in fashion. This is more broad than eTry-on now. So it is clear that there is massive investment in XR at the moment, and particularly focusing in fashion as well, from social media companies, from gaming companies, less so from the industry, interestingly. Partly that's happening because of an increase in mobile compute power and on the sensing capabilities of mobiles. But some of it is completely de novo for VR. So Facebook, for example, seem a lot more heavily invested in VR than they are in AR. So yeah, it's across a range of technologies. And we also have some encouragement from adjacent sectors, industrial sectors. So there's been a lot of success, especially in selling and in retail, in furniture and cosmetics, using AR. And that kind of encourages people in fashion that there might be good results from getting consumers using AR technology in fashion as well. One of the big challenges, just to start from the bottom, is that this isn't something that users are really crying out for. It isn't something that users are demanding. This is being led from the technology end, from the industrial end. And that's always kind of a bit of an alarm bell. It's going to be very important, I think, as we drive these technologies and applications out, to be very, very mindful about whether they are creating emergent behaviors with consumers, whether they're really resonating with consumers, and whether the emergent behaviors are the ones that we really wanted, or whether they're positive ones. We've still got some technical challenges. A couple of those it's very hard actually to capture a good cloth material to represent it in XR frameworks. it's even harder to create a good cloth material that looks exactly like a real cloth and to have that fidelity. That is part of the reason why XR models in fashion are still extremely expensive to build. They take a long time, and they need to use fairly specialist tooling, and that is a definite challenge. Another one is something that we haven't really gone into in this presentation, which is that in all of these things I've been talking about, I've rather assumed that 3D CAD exists and that fashion is designed through 3D CAD. This is definitely not the case. Probably about 15, maybe 20% of garments are designed in 3D. Everything else is designed usually in 2D, sometimes digital 2D, but usually in 2D. And given the inertia around working practices and given the inertia around tooling, adoption of 3D CAD has been pretty slow. Adoption has been slow and rollout has been slow. And I think that it will pick up, but it's still, compared to the pace of technology adoption in consumer markets, it's extremely slow stuff. Okay, I've given a few of snap codes, so if anybody wants to screen grab this page, if they want to play with Snapchat with any of those lenses, they can. Otherwise, let's take some questions.
Yes, thank you, Jim, for the very interesting presentation. Yes, I guess all the panelists and the attendants can post their questions in the Q&A chat if they have something to ask. In order to give some time, I just want to, out of curiosity, there is always, let's say, this question whether the pandemic, what is the impact of the pandemic in the different sectors and industries? And the question would be that during this, let's say, couple of years that we had to let's say, stay in social distancing and keep these measures, was there any increase in interest in this kind of technologies like virtual try-ons or virtual design of 3D clothes? I mean, was there any strong correlation or it didn't affect at all?
So there was an awful lot more interest in virtual try-on for e-commerce. E-commerce became the only selling, going from being, depending on the country, 15%, 10%, maybe 25% of sales channel to being the only sales channel anybody could use. So anything people could do to improve their e-commerce performance was very hot. So at retail, virtual try-on became extremely interesting, and virtual model imagery as well. In the supply chain, in product development, the picture was a bit more mixed. There definitely was an increased emphasis on trying to adopt 3D, trying to move to virtual sampling as supply chains got disrupted. But that was probably about balanced by the fact that 3D is an innovation activity and got quite badly hit by the financial performance of the company. So as sales started to dry up in the pandemic and as companies started to feel the pinch and the cuts, there were a lot of headcount cuts, and a lot of those headcount cuts fell in areas like innovation. So as there was an increase in interest, actually there were fewer people to actually do anything about it. So those two factors balanced each other out.
Okay, thank you. It makes perfect sense. I don't know if anybody else would like to raise a question, either in the Q&A or orally, from the panelists maybe. Okay, maybe then we can move on to the next presentation, and if there are, let's say, any questions, we can, let's say, always come back, Jim, and provide you the answer.
That's great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Jim, for the very nice presentation. Okay, and moving on with our schedule, we will move on to Orestis Sarakatsanos. Orestis has studied as an electrical and computer engineer in the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece and completed his master's in data science in the International Hellenic University. After some initial, let's say, work on as an administrator, he recently joined our Information Technology Institute in the Center of Research and Technology, Hellas, with the intention to work as an early stage researcher on cloth simulation. And what he will be presenting us is a VR application made from Unity engine, which is it has been, let's say, in the context of the InTryon project, and its goal is for the visual fitting of fashion garments on avatars. So it's essentially a virtual showroom, as mentioned previously by Jim, to help the designers to better design their garments. Oreste, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. Let me share my screen so I can present you. Okay, I think you should be seeing it by now. Okay, so as both Jim and Spiros mentioned, this application was developed in the aspects of the InTryon project. Our goal was to develop an immersive VR application that enhances the experience of the fashion designers and simulates, how can I close this? And simulates the designer's fitting room that offers close-up inspection of an avatar wearing some garments and performing some different movements and animations. For our purposes of this application, the most suitable choice was to develop it in a game engine library. We wanted this library to offer cloth simulation options with multi-platform VR and AR support, and also offer us some detailed parameter configuration for the simulation. As a result, we explored some options, specifically the following game engines. First of all, we checked Unity and the basic library it has for cloth simulation, but it offers little capabilities with and many restrictions, so it's not suitable for us. Then again, we checked the Magica Cloth library that is also included in Unity, but again, despite it being slightly better than the default one, it still lacked some parameter configuration we wanted. We gave a try for the Amazon Lumberyard engine with the new Amazon graphics engine, but because it is new at the moment, it doesn't really have much VR and AR support. Unreal Engine was lacking in the multi-platform support we wanted because the cloth simulation is performed at GPU level, so it's only for Windows. And finally, OBCloth library, which is inside Unity as well, offered the most of what we were looking for, including multi-platform support, VR and AR, and also quite a detailed parameter configuration. In general, in the market, currently, there are plenty of 3D design software and libraries that exist, like Brosware, Cloth3D, and some other. Again, as I mentioned, our goal was to develop an immersive application that enhances the experience of the fashion designers and accommodates the cloth designing process. As I mentioned again, it was implemented in Unity using the OBCloth library, and specifically we had some components to develop. First one would say it was the VR scene terrain, the room of the scene where this fitting takes place. Then we had to think about the interaction options between the user and the scene assets. And the assets are the avatars, the garment, and the animations that appear in the application. You can see a preview of how the current state of the application looks here. The terrain or the scene resembles a fitting room where the designers are testing their clothes, and yeah, the designer is able to interact with some assets of the scene and the camera, some rotations, change animations and clothes. And to achieve that, there are potentially three options. The first one is to use the VR headset's controller and point and click on the floating buttons. This approach is the one we actually use for the currently working demo. It is the easiest one, but the drawback is that you have to see these floating buttons. Another approach is to map all the actions in the controller, but then the designer would have to learn what each button on the controller does. And a third possible option is maybe a hybrid of these two. Maybe a selection panel can emerge from the scene using the controller, and then we point and click on the corresponding buttons. Again, we have, in terms of the animations and the simulations, we had two main approaches for our application. The first one, as Jim mentioned, would be the OB cloth library that adds simulation parameters to all the garments that are included. And one newer one that we also explore is the Broswell Alembic file exports. Alembic files are computer graphics files that are capable of containing all the information regarding garment, avatar meshes, the textures of these, and both the animation and the movement. And our goal is to possibly explore the capabilities of both these options and see what we can do from both these worlds. Let's talk about the OB cloth library first. OB is a collection of particle-based physics for Unity. To use it, we need, first of all, rigged avatars of the persons we want to use so that Unity can apply humanoid animations to them. The humanoid animations we used are somewhat fashion related, and they are available through Mixamo, which is a company that offers some 3D animations. In the future, we want the user to also be able to upload some custom animations of their own from a back office app that we will also develop in the aspects of eTry-on. Talking about the garments, one big trick about the garments is that they are designed to reach production, which means that they are not in a format to be used by game engines. So we have to somehow transfer accurate simulations of these professional designing software to the VR space that we develop in the game engine. So we had to follow a specific pipeline for this. First, we need to skin this garment with respect to the corresponding rig of the avatar it's going to be fitted on. Then we need to transform, as I mentioned, the simulation parameters and information from the professional software to game engine, and by effectively setting up all these properties, we achieve a realistic simulation. We will also need to be capable of stitching inside Unity all the different submeshes in one when it is needed. OB-Cloth library is using some main properties for each particle. First is the skin backstop, which, as it is described, is a value that shows how much each particle is allowed to enter the mesh. It's also the backstop radius, as you can see here, which is an invisible collision sphere behind the particle that keeps it from penetrating the skinned mesh. The skin radius, this one here, is the freedom of how much this particle can move from its initial position during the simulation. Bigger value means bigger freedom. And skin compliance defines the stiffness of the cloth, and most of the time we keep it at 0. So the way OBI works inside Unity is that each submesh of the garment is automatically given from scripts, the cloth parameters and the OBI cloth components and the values. The script is capable of reading the topology, the mesh topology of each garment and creates a corresponding OBI blueprint based on it and also gives values to it. Of course, by effectively setting up all these values, we can achieve as much as realistic simulation as possible. And we need to develop an algorithm, a machine learning algorithm that predicts these values and automatically uses them as ground truth from the browser software simulations. We are also able to stitch the garments when it is needed inside Unity. We have developed some scripts that add an automatic OBI stitcher component to the garment pieces. And the way it works is that it scans the whole, the garment and scans each submesh of the garment, the particle positions of it. And for each possible combination of two submeshes, if the particle positions overlap with the particle position of the second, the algorithm stitches these edges, which means that, for example, the algorithm will automatically stitch a sleeve and the main torso in the sleeve edges, like here. During the simulation, this stitching algorithm executes and is able to stitch on runtime without any significant performance hit. One also issue we had with OBI cloth inside Unity is that because Unity accepts the humanoid rigs in T-pose by default, using it creates distortions, as you can see here, because the garment needs to follow exactly the topology of the body it's fitted on. So when using T-pose, the initial wrinkles you can see here were persisted in the simulation as well, with obvious undesirable results. To tackle this problem, we use a simple solution, like we have to, the initial pose of the avatar needs to be on A pose, so we can easily avoid this kind of problem. However, the parameterization of the OBI garments is not ideal yet because we haven't successfully developed a deep learning model that predicts the optimal values. Once this is further improved, we expect a big simulation improvement in the results as well using OBI. Because of that, we also explore a second alternative main route. Recently, Browseware enabled some animated simulation of garments within its software, but it offers only some restricted animations, so we didn't have much choice from this. So our approach was to make a combination of both Browseware and use them as animated simulations as input to Unity. So we create the simulations in Browseware, we export it in a lemming format, and then we insert it in Unity. This alembic approach offers a great visual result of how the product looks on the rear body, but because it was pre-rendered inside the different program, it lacks any possible interaction in the scene, apart from maybe some camera movements or rotation. As you can understand, it's like a trade-off between visual quality and interaction options for the scene. These here are two garments, similar. I think they're the same garment. On the left, you see the Browseware simulation. On the right, you see the OBI. Here, you can see it's more detailed in the wrinklings and the draping compared to this. And also one big positive of the alembic is that there is no limitation of the mesh quality, while when using OBI, we are heavily affected by how much polygons its garment mesh has, because it greatly affects the performance inside Unity. So as I mentioned, it's a trade-off between animation simulation accuracy and interactivity and real-time capabilities when inside the scene. Well, what is best and what we can change depends on what the designer needs, like more quality or maybe more interaction. And generally, our idea is to check and work on both implementations and constantly be on contact with the fashion designers, get feedback and see which one fits mostly the requirements. So before I close, I can show you a quick view of how the application looks at the moment. I made a Windows build because it's not easy for me to share it with you using the glasses. So right now you don't see the usual pointer options like the red lines when using a VR headset. So I'm just clicking with my mouse, but the idea is the same. So there are some interaction options here. If I click here, you change the animation. Well, in the glasses, there is also some camera rotation, as I mentioned, and some zoom in, zoom out. I can't do it right now, unfortunately. I'm able to pause and unpause the animation, and also I can change the speed. So I can inspect the garment in my time. Also, I included an option to change how the fabric looks, because it's not exactly the same as the real product. So I have to change these values, and depending on the feedback of the designers to see in which values it provides us the best visual result. See here, can change this. Again, I'm using my mouse to do that, but you're able to, it also works on a VR headset as well. Yeah, this is the currently working demo for this application. And I think that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need anything else. Thank you.
Okay, Orestes, thank you very much for the presentation. If there are any questions from the attendants in the panels. One question that I may have is whether, and in relation to what Jim said about the collaborative design, do you see this, let's say, being transported into something like a collaborative space for designers and like a multiplayer, let's say, experience?
If you are asking if it can allow more than one user at the same time, I don't know if it is possible. Maybe yes, and it might be a good idea actually, so that multiple users can get the same feedback at the same time. Okay, yes.
In your plans, are there any plans to incorporate some potential for interacting with the avatars? Or?
Well, using, as I said, using the lambing approach, the options to interact with the scene are restricted. It's mostly what I saw, like maybe a camera zoom in, camera rotation, or maybe the avatar rotation, or change the materials of the clothes. But if we are using, if we manage to get a good simulation result with Obi, then we would be able to have more interaction option as well, because Obi allows some manual dragging maybe of the cloth, like dragging it in some spot and see how it behaves, something like that. So Obi offers more options for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, we can move to our next speaker. I guess so. So this will be Konstantinos Ikonomou, where Konstantinos, he's another graduate researcher that is finishing his studies in the US right now, and he's currently in the US. So thank you very much for joining us, because it's a different time zone there. And when he was in Greece due to the pandemic, he joined our forces in the Information Technologies Institute, and he has worked on a Snapchat augmented reality filter for the virtual try-on of real clothes. He will now present us his work. Konstantinos, the floor is yours.
Well, hello everyone. I hope you can all see me. Let me just see if I can put it on my screen real quick. Awesome. So as Spiro said, my name is Konstantinos. David from Retail and I were the core developers of the Snapchat filter that I'm about to show you about how it works and what actually led us to create it. So yeah, let's get into it. An overview of my presentation here, I will talk about briefly, I will set the setting with, about what's the deal with social media and augmented reality and how fashion comes into play. Then we're actually going to see how we prepared the avatars and the garments for the Snapchat for the AR experience, then how this experience was actually composed, and then we'll get the chance to see a demo of everything. So social media and AR, AR is a very new tool for targeted marketing used by many of the largest social media companies out there. Facebook has their own effects that they use mainly on Instagram. So people can overlay those effects over their real life image displayed by the mobile camera, and they can actually take pictures, share them with their friends or on their stories, and have that kind of interaction. That creates a new aspect of interactivity and vividness, and has been proven to be a very active marketing tool. So in preparation for our Magic Mirror application, we would think that it would be a good type of minimum viable product, so that we can actually prove that would work as a proof of concept for the Magic Mirror application. So each company has created their own software that enables creators to make those AR filters. Currently, the two biggest ones, as I mentioned before, are Facebook's Spark AR Studio and Snap's Lens Studio, respectively, for Instagram and Snapchat. There are some very big feature differences at the moment in those two software that led us to use Lens Studio instead of Spark AR. And I will briefly mention them here, although we will get into more detail later. So Lens Studio enables 3D body tracking, which is a really important feature for our task, since we are actually trying to map the garment onto the user's body. Moreover, they offer a body mesh feature, which actually is a really cool feature that creates a custom mesh that mimics the user's body as a 3D mesh in real time. And we can also get out-of-the-box physics simulations through Lens Studio, mostly with position-based dynamics and chain-like simulation features. So there are some very progressive examples going on in the fashion industry right now. Jim has actually briefly mentioned some of them before. So the Fabricant is a really interesting case where it is an all digital fashion house where people can go up on their website and purchase virtual clothes. They do a lot of very nice animations and promotional campaigns to promote digital fashion. Then secondly, something that an application that was actually kind of very similar to what I'm going to show you now was Sephora's virtual artist, where people could actually use their mobile phones to preview what makeup would look like on their face. And also the Warby Parker application, where people could actually were actually shown how glasses would look on them in real time through their mobile screens. So when it comes to more to clothing and garments, We noticed a shift from the traditional design process, which is pen and paper, to the use of 3D fashion design software. Currently, the two main software that are being used out there are Clo3D by Virtual Fashion and the Browser Suite, in which Vistitcher is a main product. Those kind of software feature a lot of different cool aspects, including modular design, 2D parting design, 3D simulation, garment editing, fabric simulations, etc. So the result of this new design process is that we can actually get production-ready garments through this software. So we can actually have more faster design iterations, and it actually speeds up the feedback loop from different stakeholders as the product can actually be shown to people as it is being designed. And designers do not have to actually create the clothes before they show them to their product managers or the consumers, etc. The issue with this is that these product-ready garments are not appropriate for visualization in the context of an AR experience, and there's a great deal of post-processing needed, and this is what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So, what are the steps that enable us to take a production-ready garment that was created in fashion design software and turn it into a garment that is ready to use in an AR experience, such as a snapshot lens. So the overview of the garment preparation is that we start by generating an avatar, and we use some really cool tools for that. Then we actually simulate this garment on the avatar that we have created using the fashion design software. And then we actually create a skeleton for the garment by the process of rigging. So during the avatar generation, what we did was extracted the average body shape measurements from the Caesar dataset, and we used them to generate a statistical body model. So here you can see there are different measurements for avatars according to that dataset, and a visualization of what they look like for the male and female avatar, respectively. After we generated those avatars, the problem with them was that they have a very complex rig structure. The skeleton is very complex. It includes a lot of bones that actually enables better pose setting, as it's more accurate. However, these joints do not correspond to the ones that are tracked by Snapchat during their body tracking process. So we had to create a tool to perform 3 different types of operations. So we had to remove nodes and their children, remove of nodes and reparenting their children, and then rename the nodes so that they match the Snap naming conventions. So when a node is removed from the structure, we need to recompute the skinning weights for the vertices that are affected. And during this recomputation, the skinning weights for any given vertex should add up to 1, so that the linear blending skinning equation behaves correctly during the rendering. So here you can see what the avatar looks like after we processed it, with clearly a lot fewer bones that actually correspond to the specifications of the Snapchat software. Last but not least, we needed to specify some draping points. When we generated the avatar from tape measurements before, there are some anchor points that are defined so that the avatar can be dressed in the garments within the fashion design software. So for the avatars, when they're generated, they have a bind pose of a T pose, that is with the arms extended to the sides. However, as Orestes mentioned earlier, there is when we simulate garments on a T-pose, there are some artifacts created on the shoulder area. So we added the generic A pose so that the garments can simulate better. Then we actually open the fashion design software and simulate the garments that we want on the avatar that we have created. And then we extract an FBX file containing the textures and the materials for the garment. Then the next step in this process, which is an actual very interesting step, is the transfer of the skeleton and the skinning weights from the avatar to the garment, so that we are able to demonstrate how different movements of joints affect the garment's mesh. So the skeleton is copied over from the avatar, and we are actually merging all the different sub meshes with the same materials into a single mesh. And every garment vertex is matched to the nearest K vertices in the avatar. So we use a K nearest neighbor algorithm to average those skinning weights and actually map them to the garment's vertices. Then we reset the garment to a T-pose, and we reorient the bones so that the up axis of every joint with a single child points towards that child. This is a step that is going on because of some Snapchat's peculiarities, and it does not support the generic orientation of the bones. So we need to be specific with that. Then we move on. So this was the biggest step of the process, of course, which was the preparation of the avatar and the garment. And now we have all the building blocks that we need to compose an AR experience. So that would take us to Lens Studio in this case, or Spark AR, if we were making an Instagram lens. And what we do here is we add the full body tracking components. We will use the body mesh feature that I mentioned earlier to occlude different parts of the garment when the user's limbs are overlapping them. And then we, of course, publish the filter on the social media platform. So here you can see what the garment looks like after body tracking is added. So we attach the garment to the set of body features found in the camera using a 3D object tracking component in Lens Studio, along with a body tracking asset, which is an asset that specifies the different joints that are actually detected by the camera during body tracking. However, as you can see here, whenever the user's hands or arms are overlapping the garment, you can see that there's clearly no view of that, and it actually shows behind the garment. This is why we will actually use body mesh occlusion to tackle this problem. So we insert a body mesh into the scene, and we assign it an occlusion material. So this is the desired effect that whenever, as I said before, the user's limbs go over the garment's mesh is occluded in real time. Finally, this is the coolest part of the demo, so you can see what our work looks like. Let me not start them all at the same time. As you can see in this video, the garment is actually following the bones of the human. This is the same kind of demonstration with a different garment. And then again, you can see the movement here. But it wouldn't be worth it if you couldn't test it out yourselves. So this is a snap code that you can scan using your phone application and check it out yourselves. So yeah, that was my presentation. Let me know of any questions you might have. I would be happy to help.
So, Konstantina, thank you very much for your presentation and for these nice demos. Again, potential questions can be, let's say, inserted in the Q&A chat. One question that I can do is, what is so fundamentally different? We understand that they're different. What is so fundamentally different between virtual try-ons and the other magic mirror applications like hairstyle and makeup and so on? What makes it so much more difficult than the other cases to make it seem so realistic?
Yeah, so apparently the direction that the industry goes so far is actually more towards face segmentation and face tracking. So we are really good at this point, and Spark AR has actually far more advanced face detection features than Snapchat has currently. So we're more advanced into detecting different parts of the face, but not the whole body. This is just because of the whole, selfie kind of movement and how people would like to have effects overlaid over them while FaceTiming or video conferencing and everything. So yeah, AR is basically used for this up to this point, and but we see that as Snap is actually moving forward to, including those different body tracking features as well.
Okay, thank you very much. It makes sense, yes, because I can see that many, let's say, big platforms are trying to incorporate these body tracking functionalities.
Exactly. Some of the basic, someone could ask, why wouldn't you use this instead of a magic mirror application? What else would the magic mirror application offer? And the biggest thing that I didn't actually explicitly point out here is that there is no actual simulation of the garment going on in this snapshot lens. So we're not able to see the garment moving on its own due to gravity or other physics factors. And this is what are the next steps forward for this use case.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Konstantina, and for the presentation and the very nice demos. If there are no other questions, we can break here for half an hour and come back with David. I don't know, Jim, you want to, let's see.
No, that's great. Let's take a break and come back at, what would it be, 5 o'clock local time.
Okay, great.
See you then.
Hi, everybody. We can, let's say, resume our session, our workshop. The next speaker that you can already see, it's David Gullivan. David received his higher engineering degree on computer science from the University of Barcelona, Autonomous University of Barcelona. And he has worked as he was a research student at the Tokyo Institute of Technology in Japan, where he also received his master's and PhD degree. David has worked both as a researcher in R&D department, but as well as a 3D graphics programmer. And this is mostly what he's now doing in the Metail. He's a graphics designer and engineering manager. And he will be presenting his related activities. David, the floor is yours. But we cannot hear you now.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Now very well.
Okay, cool. Sorry, let me share my screen. I hope everyone is still awake. Right. Oh, how can I hide this? Present. Can you see the slides?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, so yep, thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm David Gavilan from Metail, and today I'm going to talk about how we bring the garment 3D designs to Lens Studio, which is the tool from Snap to make filters for Snapchat, AR filters. And I will discuss the challenges into the faithful garment representation in these AR experiences. So I think this segues nicely with all the previous presentation. So before going into details, let me review a bit about what Jim already presented about what we do at Metail, which is this echo shot. So these images here are echo shot images that we create with our rendering plugin for VS Teacher. And the service that we provide, you can think of it kind of like ray trace static AR, augmented reality for professional photographic models. So these are professional models. We photograph them, and then we create, well, brands create the 3D designs in the 3D CAD software, and then the service makes a rendering in 3D of those garments and compose them into those photographs. So it's kind of like AR but static, because we are after very high quality representations of those garments. So that's echo shot, and the reason I'm showing you some echo shot examples here is because in this presentation I'll use some echo shot images as reference, because we need some kind of ground truth of garment appearance. Because it would be hard to know whether we're doing it right or not. So we'll use these images as reference. Right. Okay, so now let's jump into a demo. I have a 5-minute demo. To avoid any boo-boos, I recorded it. So I'll just play the video and I'll talk through it. So can you see the video? Playing. Right, so this is VS Teacher, and you can select a different avatars in VS Teacher. Now we have prepared some avatar from Lens Studio that you need to dress. So I've already run the simulation to avoid you the pain of waiting for it to drape. But basically you dress it and then you select the grid size of the simulation. This is very rough, but I'll explain later. But we need, for Lens Studio, have some limitations of the amount of polygons. And then in the plugin, there's a menu here that I've added, which is export as a skin garment. So this simply creates an FBX file, which adds a rig to the geometry to this garment mesh. This is what the process that Konstantinos has explained earlier. So it skins the garment. I'll talk a bit about the skin in a bit as well. But if you remember Konstantina's talk, it's basically adding this skeleton and some skinning weights. I'm opening Blender now because I want to show how the exported FBX looks like. Unfortunately, well, this is running in real time, and Blender is a bit slow opening these files for some reason. So I'm going to show you in the meantime how the plugin works. So the plugin has a manifest file, which is just a JSON file, which describes the different supported avatars. So you can have as many avatars as you want. We have 2 here. And then you have a description of the poses that are available as well. Each pose is also a JSON file. And this is used to for the skinning algorithm that Konstantinos explained earlier to figure out the pose that needs to be applied and inverted and to run the skinning transfer that he explained. So this is the result of the skinning transfer. So you see the garment has now been put back in a T pose, even though it was draped on an A pose. As Konstantinos says, it's simulated on an A pose, so it looks more natural. But then it needs to be in an A pose or imported it in Lens Studio. These are the materials, how they look in Blender. It's completely rigged, so you can see the skeleton, you can select joints, and you can rotate it and see how it looks. It's not, again, this is just purely skin. It's not going to do any close simulation. The close simulation was done already in VS Teacher and an AI pose. Then I'm saving the file again. This is, well, it's a workaround because at the moment, Lens Studio doesn't understand our files directly, but so we just save it again. Just the armature and the mesh because you don't want to import any lights or anything. But this is basically the same file the plugin creates. And I already have a Lens Studio template here open. I duplicate one of these and the existing outfit that I have in there, rename it, and I'm going to import the FBX file that I just saved, which is this sports dress from Blender. So on import, what happens, you see now on this is myself on the right, it looks like it's a T pose. It doesn't track the body. Well, I'm going to delete. I need to delete the previous objects. And now, because we've prepared the skeleton, as Konstantinos explained, you can just click match hierarchy and it will track all the bones. And now you can see that this white outfit is actually following me as in the existing one. I am disabling now this black outfit. Next thing is I'm going to enable the head occluder. So now you can see that my neck is occluding the back of the garment. And finally, we just need to manually import the textures because the material is imported, but it doesn't automatically import the textures. We need to figure out how to do this automatically, but you just need to drag and drop the textures from VS Teacher exports. I'm going to just import the albedo map, which is the color, and the normal map. So it tells you the direction of the normals. And you just need to select here the color, the albedo in the material, and then also the normals. And that's basically all of it. So that's how it looks like. And that's ready to publish. You just click publish lens here. You are able to publish it to Snapchat. So, well, you see, it's just 5 minutes of clickety-click. I'm going to continue there.
David, I think there is a raised hand. I don't know if you want to interrupt now and take the question. From an attendant, I don't know if she can speak or not.
Could we save the questions for the end?
Okay, so please, I mean, there is a raised hand. Please write the question into the Q&A chat.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm leaving 5 minutes for questions if that's okay.
No problem. Please go on because yes, please go on and we'll take this in the end.
Right. So now that's how we do the Lens Studio import at the moment. But I wanted to discuss now all the challenges that we have in bringing those garments to life. As it has been explained by Jim earlier today, the designer tool, well, VStitcher in this case, is concerned about accuracy, whereas the real-time AR apps like Lens Studio need to sacrifice accuracy for interactivity, right? Real-time applications. And then it means that we have to solve several accuracy challenges. I've selected these 6 topics, which I think is the main thing, which are body shape and the implicit pose in that shape. And then the level of detail, the garment movement or draping, the layering of garments, because to create an outfit, you need to layer different garments together, the material appearance and lighting. These two are interrelated. So let's start with the body shape. So in VStitcher, each garment size is simulated on the appropriate avatar. So for instance, here, I've selected a single size of this jacket, and then I'm simulating it in different body shapes. So these two persons. So these 2 images on the left are EchoShot images created from VStitcher. So this is what I said. I'm going to use these EchoShot images as reference. So in real life, there may be some difference, but we're going to trust this as to be as close as possible as real life. And you can see that the creases and wrinkles change depending on the body shape, right? So it may look tighter or not. Also, it depends on the pose. The number of shadows created and everything looks different depending on the body shape and pose. Whereas in a Snapchat or Lens Studio, what we're going to have is that the garment is scaled approximately to match the tracked body. This is done using the joint positions in the body tracking, so they are scaled. So you can start to see the difference here, because this is simulated in a single body, and then it's just transferred to a different body shape. Now the second challenge is the level of detail. So in VStitcher, because it's done offline, we don't have any restrictions. We can have millions of polygons. Whereas in a Snapchat, it's the order of thousands of polygons that we can have. That's what I show in the demo, that I changed the grid size. So the simulation size is rather. Here I exaggerate a bit. So in the image on the left, the grid size is set to 0.6 centimeters. So it's quite accurate simulation. But on the right, I'm using 4 centimeters grid size. So you can see that the number of creases and wrinkles created are very different if you use 4 centimeters. Well, I've used this as an exaggeration. Usually you can go and add more detail. But anyway, you need to strike a balance between interactivity and accuracy again. And also there are some other details like buttons that can be very high poly. And you have to decide whether you want to change those elements manually, create low poly versions of these things, or if you want to just remove them completely or what. Another challenge is movement. So in VStitcher, draping is simulated per pose. So you change the pose and then the draping happens again, the close simulation happens again. For Snapchat, we're gonna rely on skinning. Skinning, I'll review it again. Already explained by Konstantinos, but skinning is also known as vertex blending, or enveloping, or skeleton subspace deformation. Basically, try to explain it with few words. If you imagine this garment is formed by many vertices, like 3 vertices per triangle, per polygon, right? And each vertex is painted with a color that tells you how much a joint from the skeleton contributes to the deformation of that vertex. So for instance, if the thighs are represented here in green, so if you move the thigh, all this area is going to move. But in the transition where from green to orange, orange corresponds to the crotch, and then it's gonna move a bit, so half and half. So that's what this drawing represents in here. So this is an example. So in the same, exactly the same pose, this looks natural. So this image with the pants straight, with the trousers straight here, and these creases, though, they do not change even if I repose it. So if I apply a pose to the skeleton, it moves, but the creases do not move. The wrinkles stay the same. If you want to read more details, you can go on to our tech blog, the tech.metal.com, and there's a blog post on the skinning and a 3D animation. Then, so the other challenge is layering. So by layering, I mean creating an outfit that is formed by several garments. So in this case, even though you cannot see it, there's an inner vest, a white vest that is worn by the avatar in here. So if you run the skinning plugin from VS Stitcher, then everything gets exported. Everything has a skinning weight. So everything is painted like in the previous slide. But what happens is that because they animate separately, the position of this inner vest, it's white, but you cannot see it. It will fight with the position of the t-shirt at some points as you move. So this is called a Z fighting, or you can say it a type of clipping. So you can see on the chest, some of the white vest is showing through. Because this is not shown at any point, I think the easier solution is if you import this thing in Blender, go in Blender and delete the bits that are not visible in this case. But this has to be done manually at the moment. Right, so there's another challenge. Now let's go to one of the biggest challenge, which is material appearance. So materials in VS Stitcher use physically based rendering PBR materials, and we use ray tracing. Well, in this case, we use V-Ray for doing the ray tracings, and the Snapchat renderer. Well, there are several options, but you have by default you have a PBR material as well, but it has limited PBR support and it doesn't have global illumination. By global illumination, I mean things like light bounces. Light bounces is when if you are wearing something like bright red and close it to your face, that some bit of redness is gonna bounce to your face, and your face is gonna look a bit red. So in this case, I chose precisely this jacket because it illustrates this, because it's very bright orange. So in the images on the right, these are all rendered using Lens Studio in real time, but I had to do some manual adjustments to try to make it look as close to the reference. The reference again is an echo shot image, close to this echo shot image as possible. It's not exactly the same, but I managed to do something there. I'll explain later how. Then the last challenge is lighting. In VS Stitcher, we use a static environment map and high dynamic range. So this is an image of our Metal Studio HDR environment map. And because all our models are shot in the same studio, then there's we can achieve consistency between the renderings and the photographs. So we know that we can trust that this is a good reference. But in Snapchat, because the user is going to be in a different environment, in the room or outdoors or whatever, we need dynamic environment maps. You can use the static maps, but then you don't know if the user is going to be in a similar place or not. And also, if you want something like shadows, because there's no ray tracing, no global illumination, then you would need something like a directional light, which is what you see here at the bottom. So the right one. Right. So let's talk about some fudge that I've added here. So the environment map can be estimated dynamically from a single picture in Lens Studio. That's great. But we need some fudge to simulate the global illumination, right? So this is, I put 3 examples here. The one on the left is a Lens Studio rendering, but using the Metal Studio environment map for like statically for rendering. But then that turns out to be, that's okay for a studio, but I'm here on, this is a night scene, it should be darker. So if I replace that, the static environment map for the dynamic environment map of Lens Studio, I have the image in the middle, which I think that the brightness is closer to, it matches the photograph better, but then it lacks contrast. So in the one on the right, I've added the directional light to add more contrast, more shade. You can see that there's a bit of more, well, it's hard to explain, but the light is coming from the right, and then you see a bit of more shade in there. So it's a bit of a manual fudge in this case. The Lens Studio materials, as I said, by default, they have a PBR. And these are examples of how to adjust the PBR. If you export all the PBR options from VS Stitcher, you end up having something that not quite it doesn't quite look the same. The one on the left is the ray trace from V-Ray. The next one is just the diffuse channel. You can see that there's a bit of color mismatch. The third one is if I added the specular component to the shader. In principle, it should have a specular component. It's exported from VS Stitcher PBR materials, but if I add that, it looks too bright. It doesn't really match what I see in the reference ray trace. And then the last one is the fourth one here is what I ended up having, which is it includes a fudge factor, which is an emissive map that I've added. It's additive, and it tries to match the color of the reference. So yeah, that's the fudge, and I'm going to show you a couple of videos of using a Snapchat with this garment. So you can see the light changes a bit as I move with the dynamic, and the body tracking. It works quite well, I think. But yeah, there's some artifacts as it moves. Well, and just to wrap up, I like to talk about the backward journey of light. Well, if you want details about this, you can go again to our blog post, techmetal.com. But bear in mind that before you go and discuss that the problems with the light, if the light needs changing, I like to think that the image that you're seeing is first in your brain. So when you talk to other people, you need to have some common vocabulary and know what you're talking about before you go and look at the problems. And then also you have to have into account that the different people have different eyes, different color perceptions. Some women have 4 photoreceptors. Most of us have only 3 photoreceptors. Some other people are colorblind. So you have to take all that into account. The device, I recommend that everyone is using the same device for having a common reference. For instance, if you all have iPhones, which have calibrated screens, just use the iPhone, and at least you know that you're watching the same thing. And also the file that you watch, make sure that you use the same renderer, etc. And then if you find that there's a problem, then you go and see your lighting, your materials, etc. But that's the gist of it. And if you have any questions now, you can answer. You can see the chat. Any questions?
There are a couple of raised hands, but I'm not aware whether the attendants can speak or they have to go through the Q&A chat.
Do
you know?
What about Discord?
Bruce or Sadie Ali, can you speak? It's not raised anymore.
No questions.
Jim, you know how this works? Maybe.
I believe you're right. People need to use the Q&A feature in Zoom to ask questions, but David and I are also looking on Discord if they want to type there, but I don't think they're able to speak. I don't know.
Okay.
Aha.
Okay.
So Bruce asks, how do you accommodate people with the same size skeleton but different body mass?
Say that again, sorry.
The same size skeleton but different body mass. So different shapes but the same skeleton.
Same size as skeleton, different body mass. Well, is in Lens Studio, I do not know. Fat arms versus thin arms. There's no control in Lens Studio about that. It's very at the moment. So for EchoShot, we have we scan the model, so we know that the reference is right. We take 3D scans of the models, as Jim explained. But once we bring that into Lens Studio, it scales at the moment. Well, there are two versions. In 4 and Lens Studio 4.4, they introduced a new body mesh, which tries to match a bit better to account for this difference in body shapes, but it's still not perfect. But in previous versions, which is the one I presented from 4.3 or earlier, it just scales the joints based on the tracked position. So if you have a bigger person, maybe the shoulders are farther apart. So you know the joint position of the shoulder, and then the garment is naively scaled to match that. That's what I say, that this is a challenge, because that doesn't actually represent of how that garment would look on that person. The garment is just simply scaled. I don't know if that answers the question. Does that answer?
Jim,
Bruce says thanks, so yes, looks like it. Are there any more questions? It looks like none, Spiros.
Okay, so thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
We can now move on to the last presentation by Ryan Smith, our keynote speaker. And Ryan, just a small introduction. For Ryan, Ryan is the product lead for the media team at Shopify, where he advances image, video, and 3D AR experience for merchants and developers. Ryan was a founder and chief executive officer in Futsi, a computer vision startup, and he has an MBA from the University of British Columbia and a physics degree from the University of Victoria. Ryan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Spiros and team. Let's see if I can get So now. Great, Spiros, can you just let me know if this is presenting correctly?
It seems okay, although it's not full screen.
All right, that's what I was looking for.
That's much
Thank
better.
you. Great. So, hi everyone. I'm, as Spiros said, the product lead for media at Shopify. Shopify, as you know, is a global commerce company. We have a team dedicated to imagery, video, and 3D AR experiences. Today, you can drop a GLB model into your product media, and then we render that model through Model Viewer. And so it's just included in the platform. Shopify has been moving to many batteries included type experiences. There's two key components I just want to outlay before getting into today's talk. One is core. So when you sign up for Shopify, free account or enterprise, there's a whole bunch of product that's included in core. There's then apps. And so the whole app ecosystem is much like the Apple app ecosystem, in that you can download and integrate many different products. Some of those products are customizable, and some of them are sort of as is, and so it can plug into your storefront. And I'll show you a few examples of this today. What I thought would be interesting for this group is to provide a broader commerce point of view. I will get into some technical elements, and I do love to dive deep into the technology. But for today, I thought it'd be interesting to do a broader merchant journey point of view. Going back to some of my beginnings and still shape my thinking today, I did start out in physics, where I was working with the J4 team at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center. That team was building some of the software that helps to visualize experiments. The J4 simulator at the time, this is 20 plus years ago, was trying to design the detector in a way that it could flexibly take other detectors. And so they were doing that to see how different materials impacted the data. And so it's one of those fundamental problems in physics that the observer affects the observed. And actually, as we just saw in the prior presentation and the question there around body shape versus body skeleton, it depends on the context to what you want to render or what should be rendered and what's accurate to the human eye. Now, back in these days, the point was more, do those silicon strips give me different data than copper strips? If they're 2 millimeters wide or 3 millimeters wide, does it impact the data? And before we go and build billion-dollar equipment, can we just simulate this? And so I was part of the team that designed the software and interface so that we could easily input a new detector and see how it impacted the data. Zooming forward, in 2015, post-MBA program, I had identified a number of well-known consumer problems and some methods to solve them for buying shoes. I'm a person that loves shopping, but often find it frustrating because things just don't fit out of the box. With a few colleagues, launched this company called Footsie. Let me just play this video. So this was our first MVP. In 2016, we developed a computer vision app, photos from multiple angles, reconstruct in 3D. You can see some of the toe issues in this earlier version. The point was to provide the same level of service that you could get from going into a store. And we ended up deploying this around the world. China, US, UK, Australia, France. Worked with, Louis Vuitton, Nike, Farfetch, and others. And after 5 years, just ran out of cash. Like a lot of startups, we couldn't continue to fund R&D while servicing deployments. And then I joined Shopify. I joined Shopify in part because they were our best global partner. Shopify was out helping brands tell their story authentically. They were the most innovative brands that we were meeting in many cases. While we had sought to work for many global brands because it was very attractive from a business point of view, many global brands had legacy infrastructure, and it made it quite difficult to actually change the way that they serve their customers, especially doing something like deploying a mobile app where we're asking the customer to take photos of their feet to get proper measurements, to get proper fitting. Whereas the Shopify brands tended to want to do whatever they could to innovate. They were hustlers. They were seeking to tell a different story. They needed to compete with the global brands. And so reaching out to that team, they found a role for me in Shopify. One of the things that was attractive to them about my prior experience is how buyers are looking to increase their confidence buying online. Buying online is a proxy for buying in person, is the way I view it. If you want great service, go to a great brand, go to their showroom store with their most trained staff or their founding team, and that's the best way to buy a product. You're going to get the best service, the best knowledge, get custom features if available. Whereas online, you are dealing with a proxy, which means that product is typically less interactive. You may not know what features are available, and you sure don't have a human giving you immediate feedback. Of course, this is where new opportunities in 3D and AR start to take shape, is that these technologies can be more interactive and better serve customers for the long term. And so we look at this with a frame of how to humanize the future of commerce through media, and not just selling more things. This is a means for people to tell better stories, get more interactivity, satisfy the people that are buying from those merchants, and to provide new workflows that, again, are part of this like new emergent way of buying product, not in person, but rather through e-commerce. This is a photo that some of you might have seen. It does go, play the rounds. If I could throw up a quiz, I would say, how many of you think this is real or 3D? Being an XR4Fashion conference, I'm sure a lot of you would be like, trick question. But now check out the leather on this couch. It's incredible. The shading, under the stool, the books, it's an incredible shot. I mean, if this was a studio setup for a furniture retailer, you would think it's gorgeous. And I definitely want that couch in my living room. I can see it in my living room. The lighting is that good. It's a trick question because this is all a render. Even better, this merchant sets up the render so that they can easily substitute product. This is the kind of thing that would cost you $10,000 to $20,000 to stage if you were a merchant selling furniture. Whereas once you get everything set up with a talented 3D artist, it's a lot easier to swap product in. Very attractive for a brand investing in creating assets for their story. This is something that we were testing at Shopify before my time, but using Scene Viewer is accessible to all merchants in Core. And so if you have a couch available, you can drop it into your space with no code on the part of the merchant. Another example that we really like is seeing great meshes that can then be configured. And so for a model well designed, it's easy to then layer on a new texture And so if I have the parent texture, which is just the mesh, and I want to just drop on red or green or blue, having a configurator is really attractive to customize one's story. I didn't get the video embedded here properly, but this is another merchant selling custom bikes. So for products such as mountain bikes, it's really attractive to have 3D set up with the different textures and components so that you can quickly layer in and assemble the bike that would be ready for purchase by a customer. So this is a great retailer who's invested in the asset creation and the different variants so that it's easy to show the product if they don't have it in store. And so in contrast to the story I was leading with, I'm a merchant. I don't have an e-commerce store. I'm reliant on people to come into my store to get a great experience and engage with my product. This is a case where I'm a merchant. I can only store so much product in my physical space, but I have more options available. And so even if a customer is coming into a store, it's really attractive to have these 3D AR assets available so that you're not leaving that customer disappointed. And we see this as an opportunity cost for many retailers, whether they're in store or online, that if they're not making it available, their complete inventory or inventory that could be available, they're losing business. And so this is a customer that's taken it the distance. Just one more example here before we get into some of the meat. This was, I believe, a 3Kit. And so they are a great company. If you're not familiar with them, maybe their team's on the call, who has a Shopify app to make it easy to just quickly grab a different back shell color and customize your luggage before purchase. This, I find, is a really attractive way to showcase product versus having a carousel or making the customer need to flip through multiple images as a variant, but rather being able to quickly select the color off of a panel and see the product right away. And so it's a great use case for 3D in e-commerce. I'm plowing through my presentation here, so they're slow down a touch. Here we go. The gift that keeps on giving. And so something that I'd love everyone to take away from this presentation is looking at these assets, not just as technology or viewers or lighting, but showcasing story. This was one of the merchants who we profiled in 2019 when a product was released at Shopify. Shopify had a rich media project making it easy to drop images, video, GLB files onto their product media. Bumble Ride worked with us. We did end up getting a 3D artist to make sure that the product was rendered to the expectations of the merchant. You can see that the metal, the wheels, the texture all come out pretty well. That was a fairly labor-intensive artist effort going back and forth. However, the product did come out really well. And it's not the type of product I would naturally think behooves a 3D or AR experience, but it's been a fantastic experience for that merchant and buyers. And as someone who's expecting a kid this fall, I can tell you I've been preferring merchants who have 3D or AR so I can drop different baby products into my home, which is very similar to furniture and very similar to fashion. That it's one thing to see it, see the texture, see the metal, see the wheels, inspect and zoom. It's another to drop it into your living room in a way that's not bouncing around. And I think that bouncing around or tracking issue that we see with a lot of AR is quite problematic. And these static objects that can be dropped into your living room, for example, are solving a fundamental problem for buyers, which is I want to spend time with it. If I was shopping for a car or furniture or clothing, I would typically, try it on, sit in the car, put the clothes on, and dwell longer with the product. And being able to drop the product into your living room with AR is a means to increase dwell time. And I think Facebook was one of the companies early on to see as the seconds increase with a person dwelling on content, their confidence to buy cranks up, and so does the conversion rate. So dwell time is really attractive for merchants and buyers of product when it's a bit more static, but still interactive. It's not bouncing around on the floor. And so in terms of the gift that keeps on giving, there's the online store experience that you can get for 3D AR. There's the retail AR, as shown with the cycle example, that there's means to configure the product or show inventory that may not be available in store. Product photography is really interesting, and we've seen a number of merchants roll out products which are showing photos of a 3D render, like the very first example of the living room and the furniture. And so investing in the 3D asset in the first place, especially if it's of high quality, means I can get additional product photography, which I could use on my storefront, social media pages, etc. So the ad media assets as different than the product media assets is something that we deal with daily here at Shopify, and that they need to be converted, they need to be compressed, they need to be decimated, and they need to be fast. But all of those jobs can be done off of a really high quality asset in the first place. There are also really interesting new AR and VR experiences that are emerging that a merchant may not anticipate when they build the asset, but can access once released. I want to spend a bit of time getting into creating assets. I see this as the largest single problem that we're dealing with from a commerce point of view. For brands that have the budget to do so, they can spend time with 3D artists, 5K, 10K, 20K in. They can get their top sellers rendered. It's still quite hard to make this cost competitive today. And from a Shopify point of view, there are over 2 million merchants now. We're shipping more web traffic than Amazon globally, and are trying to figure out how to help democratize these technologies so that more merchants can benefit from this means of storytelling. There are more apps coming out to take multiple photos, not all that different than what Footsie was doing from 2015 to 2019, but it's still quite hard. It's still really hard for the average merchant to understand what they're capturing and how to set up the scene to get a good model. Today, 99.9% of merchants are getting their models made by an artist. It's labor intensive, it can be cost prohibitive, but there are many experts accessible. Shopify runs an expert marketplace, which is different than the App Store. So the App Store is a place where an integration can be made easy, to click and install a software product. The expert marketplace is more of a Yellow Pages, a place to find talent to help you do a job. So if we're looking at the Saduk, CG Trader, or other job shops that will have artists on demand, that's great. It really is. And they're what's driving the ecosystem today, but it's not enough. And just for clarity, I'm often looking at the models that reflect the intent of the merchant. And so for, say, this Puma shoe, that's a good mesh. But from here is typically where the hardest part of the job is done. How are those laces going to appear? Am I going to see the stitching? How's the texture going to appear on the fabric, the plastic, the leather? That final bit of color accuracy and pixel density, as I zoom in on the model, is it blurry or is it holding true to the intent of the designer? As the product lead, I am seeking to provide more guidance on 3D. These chairs were from the same catalog. It's the same product. The one on the right didn't render properly. The one on the left shows the gloss and reflection in the legs. The one on the right sure looks darker in terms of the seating. And this is exactly the type of problem that consumes the most number of hours by merchants today, that they go somewhere, they try to get a model built, they get it, and they go, that's not my product. So this one's a bit more obvious because of the metal on the bottom, but some of these banding issues or texture, fabric, lighting are the devil in the details, and it's really hard to hammer them all out, especially for a group of people who do not know what 3D is, 3D modeling, rendering, viewers, etc. So in many cases, they don't know exactly what to ask for. I'm working with a few teams now to build a taxonomy, something that we can publish and make accessible on shopify.com/3D as an open resource, and make it more viable for the average person running a business to get help. If this taxonomy takes shape as intended, then we can also begin to layer on a workflow. Given I've got a chair, the chair has metal, I want that reflection to be modeled correctly, then I need to be able to ask for that and know that whomever I'm asking for it is going to do so correctly. So a little bit of extra literacy to help merchants purchase the product, in this case, a 3D model that they're looking for. Another challenge with this, so model lighting is, how fast is that model going to load? So taking the funnel down to, the bottom line here, as we hit high quality models with all the right color, texture, etc., are they loading in seconds? Because if it's minutes, it's not good enough. For commerce, we're often looking at 2.5 second largest contentful paint times. We're looking for a way to keep buyers' attention. And if it's 10 seconds or 20 seconds to load a high quality 3D model, it's too long. And we're going to get that bounce. So the bounce rate is going to crank up, the conversion rate is going to drop, and all that work in the funnel is going to be for naught, or for only the most determined buyer to wait for that model to load. This was an example from one of our team who used Apple's object capture to scan his backpack. The original was in the 130,000 polygons. He was able to decimate it down to 32,000 without losing much in terms of texture or feature. You can see a little bit of the surface here, and it's like a nice beat up bag, which was the point. A little bit of that is lost, but not too much. Some of the features of the original are also a touch blurry, but not significant loss from the decimation. And this model on the right does load in seconds. whereas the model on the left sure didn't. And so we're working on technologies to make sure that after merchants have done all that work, found the model, got the texture, the vendor worked out to create that model, can we display it for them correctly, fast? So with 175 countries, all able to use Model Viewer on the storefront, this right-hand speed is what we're looking for. And I should say, this is something that is now built into Core. And so that merchants don't need to do the job of decimating their model down. This has been quite an issue for other products like imagery and video, where merchants will go and compress their JPEG down into kilobytes instead of the original megabyte file. Video, they'll go and use some third-party tool, they'll crush it down, upload it, and then see that it's blurry. It's not representing their original intent. Shopify does compress images and videos, even if they were compressed previously, and so you can end up with a double compression effect. Not good. It's better just to upload the best version, and then Shopify should use its cloud resources to deliver the best available version in the fastest seconds possible. Obviously really relevant to this conference. Aside from 3D artists, then we're looking at all various and viable technologies to support merchants to create really high quality models. And then we can support those high quality models being shipped as fast as possible. We have been testing lots of different photogrammetry and LiDAR solutions. Structured light is still a really interesting solution for many textures. I've seen some great solutions coming out of CT scanning, which is just amazing. 1980s, 90s technologies coming back around into retail, and more methods. We're really interested to see what comes out of the next few years as more of these solutions become viable to get models under $1,000, under a few $100s. And so we start to shift the economics from high cost, low volume to lower cost, high volume is the way that we need to go from a retail perspective. This particular model was of a yarn I'm pretty sure this was wool, and highlighted some of the texture issues that we were looking for with a particular mobile app, and it did an incredible job. I think in the bottom right here, you can see a little bit of blur. In another part of the model, there's a hole, but if a object capture app is viable, from a studio held by a merchant to get something of this quality, then they can ship this model over to an artist to clean it up. And so that, we think, is one of the means to massively increase the number of models produced. Use a viable technology, get a reasonable version, like it's close, it's maybe not publishable, but it's close, and then get an artist to finish it off. From the artists that I've talked to, they're really excited about this because the reality of building every single model from wireframe up is quite labor intensive, and it's not necessarily the fun part of the job, and it's not where they can best use their expertise, like their mastery of light, can be adding the little filaments on the wool. They can be cleaning up little components of the model. And so if they get a viable, high quality candidate in, then they can tune it up, and that merchant can now get an artist quality model from a half hour on their own, plus maybe a half hour or an hour with a talented artist. These are my top 5. If anyone was interested, Polycam, Clone, Turnio, Scaniverse, and the 3D Scanner app are doing incredible work with creating viable candidates that merchants can use off of fairly low training. I'm really excited about this space. This is the space that I'm spending the most amount of time with to help more merchants create more viable models to tell their stories. It's not easy right now. And we get a lot of complaints, concerns, fails from a merchant point of view. And I log those frustrations. I want to see apps like this be referable so that we can help more merchants create more models. In closing, I'm really excited about where we're going. The form factor is shifting. We're seeing some really exciting iPhone 13. I think I'm excited to get my hands on a Google Pixel 6. The chipsets are sure making these types of experience more viable off of mobile. And then the new eyewear, I see as being a massive opportunity for retail, in that if these chipsets and form factors make it easy to see product in your home, on your friends, etc., it's going to continue to improve the immersiveness, the confidence, the close to reality, so that people can not just dwell, but also make confident purchases that they enjoy. To the first slide I posted with our president, Harley, we want these stories told by Shopify merchants to not be a path to discounting. It's not just a path to selling more things cheaper and faster. We believe that there's a more democratic version of commerce, so that if you are a creator and you want to tell your story, you can do so without the technology barriers that would otherwise only be accessible to people with very large budgets. Creators are everywhere, and products like glasses are going to make more people able to access these immersive experiences. That's about where I wanted to get to today. I'd love to open up the conversation. Did you say the Q&A is the place, or do we use the chat feature here?
I think you either will work. It's just that I don't think that attendees can ask questions verbally.
Okay.
So they'll need to type. That's the long and the short of it.
Sure. Great. I'm still got my coffee sort of warm. I'm here for your questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. One question that I didn't quite got, is Shopify offering a service for designing these ad sets? I mean, how does this work? So a merchant comes to you and he wants to have an advertising for a certain product, and
I'm so sorry. Did I have my camera blocked the whole time?
Yes, you had.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Oops.
No worries. I guess I was just
sorry, what was your question there, Spiros?
I don't know. Do you offer this? I mean, this creation of 3D assets. I mean, which is you ranked as the most important thing in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Do you offer a service for this, or you have 3D artists that you engage with the client and generate the content?
There's two paths. Shopify is an e-commerce platform. On that platform, there's an expert marketplace, which is one place where we list third parties. And then the other place is the App Store. And so through the App Store, merchants can install additional software, which may provide them access to 3D models.
Yes, 3D models in general, but if they want to design something of a new product they had, they need to, I mean, cooperate with a 3D artist.
Correct. Yeah, Shopify does not do that. We're not in the asset creation business, but we have integrations to do so, or the expert marketplace to find a third party.
Okay, it's clear.
Lots of questions. Great. I hope that was helpful. I know it was a slightly different angle than the balance of the conference, but from my prior life, I found that it was hard to see some of the endpoints. And so we are often looking at the inputs as technologists and what's viable and what the technical issues are, and then seeing where things are going, and some of the demand function can then help with prioritizing the supply function. Like, where are we going to go, and what are the needs, especially as we transition from gaming and film use cases into commerce use cases. And the commerce use cases today are quite blocked, but through some of these new technologies, especially mobile scanning, but other technologies as well, increasing the throughput of that 3D asset creation pipeline means more stores are going to be carrying assets both in their store and on their e-commerce store.
So Ryan, do you see any fundamental technology barriers once we've got the assets? I mean, you were clear about the problem in creating assets, and that's been acceptably high for filming and games, but unacceptably high for e-com. But once we've got these assets, is the technology pretty much already there, or do you think there are fundamental issues there as well?
I see it being solved by category. There's more and more products available for footwear. People love their shoes. It's incredible how many service providers help you scan shoes. Clothes are making good gains, especially as we saw from the prior presentation. Clothing and apparel is a very large category. I think it's around 3 trillion. It's all the products under the sun, though, being sold in commerce. And so commerce means auto parts, it means strollers, it means so many sharp, pointy, metal, glass, transparent items that just increase all the variability and make it impossible for any one product to solve. I don't see any single solution, photogrammetry or otherwise, being able to capture all 3D product. It's just not going to be viable given all the variants. And so today I see most of the industries blocked, and I definitely see that in our merchant logs, that for their specific case, the silk dress, the Ray-Ban glasses, like it still depends on a 3D artist to manually tweak each pixel to get the desired result. So the automation, I think, is still a ways away, but I believe the path is to get some of these technologies to do the first half of the job, and then artists can complete the job.
Yep.
So it's very human in the loop for maybe the next 5 years.
Thanks.
There is a question from the attendants. So Bruce Daniel asks, how will Shopify do quality assurance on 3D assets? How will you make sure that the models people create are of adequate quality for a good shopper experience if you democratize the acquisition and non-experts start creating them?
Yeah. Welcome to Shopify. So yeah, Shopify is not a marketplace. It's not Nordstrom or Amazon or Louis Vuitton or Nike. We are not the front end of the business, and sure don't provide any constraints for what, I shouldn't say any. There are very few constraints for what can be published on the Shopify store, image, video, or 3D. And so if someone wants to put up a 3D model, which, to our eyes might look poor, they can do so. They can upload the file, it'll render on the page. Where where we do have a feed of data is frustrations. So after that merchant has posted something and it's not displaying correctly or to their expectations, that ends up getting logged. And so there's no constraint to publish. There is a feedback loop when it's unsatisfactory. Is the short answer, being a commerce platform and not a retailer. Shopify is not a retailer. That might be an unsatisfactory answer to that pointed question.
Any other question that you would like to, from the attendants or from the panelists, that they would like to raise? I guess not.
Thank you, everyone.
So thank you very much, Ryan, for joining in this workshop. And this actually, let's say, concludes our workshop today. Thank you, everybody, for joining today and for the questions and the presentations. I believe it's on a very important topic. But as Ryan also said, we don't expect anything major within the next 5 years. I mean, human will stay in the loop for quite some time.
Humans are going to be in the loop for a long time.
Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.